Welcome. Tonight we're doing a hangout called cMooc Stories, and it's actually kind of a joint hangout. It's the very first event for the Open and Connected Learning MOOC. Today's the very first day that we're starting the MOOC, and this is a broadcast on air that we're doing with some members of the Open or of the PostEtmooc community. Everyone that's in the room right now also is a co-conspirator on the Open and Connected Learning community. We've all met through various different cMoocs, connected MOOCs that we participated in. And if I look quickly, I think we all met for the first time during @MOOC. And the topic tonight is about cMoocs and what people have gotten out of them, and also kind of best practices and suggestions for people who are experiencing a MOOC for the very first time. I'm going to defer my introduction for a moment, and I'm going to ask you guests to introduce yourself. I'm also going to let you know if you're watching this hangout on air. We have other people that have said they're going to join us. Sometimes they pop in a little bit later on, so there could be a couple other guests popping in a few minutes. I'm going to go from the order I can see you on my screen. So, Erin, I'm going to have you introduce yourself first, please.
Not a problem. Thanks so much for hosting this tonight, Rhonda. My name is Erin Luong, and I am a professional school counselor. I work at Bishop Carroll High School in Calgary, Alberta. So we have the self-directed learning program, which is actually pretty cool. I've been at the school for about 8 years. Last year, I actually worked in Japan as an international liaison between Calgary and Japan. So I was able to stay connected and online while I was on the other side of the world. And they actually asked me if I wanted to play with OCLMooc while I was still over in Japan. So you don't have to be limited by not living in a city or not living in the same city as everyone else around you. You can connect from all over the world.
Super, thanks, Erin. And Paul, who was one of the first to join us, who's not an Albertan, and we're so happy he did. Can you introduce yourself, Paul?
Yes, I hope at this point I'm an honorary Albertian or whatever we call ourselves. I'm Paul Signorelli. I'm based in San Francisco. I'm a writer, a trainer, a consultant, and one of the many things I've been doing recently is immersing myself in these connectivist MOOCs, because I find that what I learn here translates very well back into some of the other online training I do, and it all actually does carry back into a lot of the face-to-face work I do. So I'm really glad to be here. This is the first time I've had the experience of sitting on the other side of the MOOC fence and helping to facilitate and design one.
Super. And Susan, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, I'm Susan Spellman-Can, and I'm a high school counselor with Erin in Bishop Carroll High School, a self-directed high school in Calgary. And I got involved in MOOCs it'll be 2 years in January that we got involved in @MOOC. And from there, we moved on, and now we're co-conspirators and looking forward to this online learning experience for educators and those who are not educators as well.
Super. And Sherry, I see you've just joined us. I'm going to put you on the spot right away. If you're live, can you introduce yourself as well, please? Nope, maybe not. She looks frozen. That's what happens, by the way, when you're in a hangout and your network connection lags. Sometimes what happens is you get frozen, and you can still see the chat taking place, but you can't participate. I did warn my children tonight to put their media devices on.
It'll be 2 years in January that we got involved in @MOOC.
Oh.
And from there, we moved on, and now we're looking forward to online experience for educators and those who are not educators as well.
Introduction. Sometimes that happens. And I can see you now. Sherry, can you go ahead right away? If you're live, can you introduce yourself?
Okay, are you talking to me?
Hi, and Sherry, will you introduce yourself?
This is.
By the way, when you're in a hangout and your network is flagged, sometimes what happens is you get frozen, and they'll see the chat taking place, but you can't participate. I did warn my children tonight. I can hear myself talking. I can tell that the playing in the background is a little bit delayed, so I can hear what I said a few minutes ago. We'll just wait for it to catch up, and then our friend Sherry will introduce herself. Sometimes that happens. And
Okay. All right. Am I here?
Yes,
here.
you are.
Oh, great. This is Sherry Edwards from Cooley Dam, Washington. I teach middle school language arts, and I started with cMooc. And I was more of a lurker during that, and then got involved in the OCLMooc only because I was so impressed by what had happened in the cMooc. So sometimes you have to just kind of lurk in it for a while, and then you see what's happening, and then you move in and participate.
Super. Thanks, Sherry.
Yep.
And I will introduce myself, but I'm just going to mention, I know that we might have some people who are new to participating with this, and I can hear a little bit of echo that's taking place, and sometimes that happens with other participants who are taking place. That's why oftentimes people have headphones on, because it can sort of eliminate that kind of echoey thing. I'm going to try and go headphone free if we can figure it out. My name's Rhonda Jessen, and I'm a media and computer teacher. And I guess I could say the open and connected learning is probably my fault. I have been participating in MOOCs since cMooc with all of these people in the room with me. I've been a connected educator a little bit longer, but I was doing it in kind of private, closed communities. And cMooc was my first MOOC and my first exposure to open learning. And since then, I have been playing and collaborating with these people and several other people in various different MOOCs and open online experiences ever since. And I'm interested in connecting with Alberta educators, but I realized I was connecting with more educators outside Alberta. Hello, Maureen. Than I was.
Hello.
So I kind of developed the framework for this open and connected learning MOOC and invited some co-conspirators to join us. And it really is a kind of team event. We've all organized different parts of this. And we're trying to do it in a very open fashion in such a way that if you wanted to set up or organize your own MOOC, you could do so based on some of the tools that we're going to share with you. And thanks for joining us, Maureen. Maureen's another Albertan who's joining us. And we're just on intro, so I'm going to put you on the hot seat right away and have you introduce yourself before we get to questions.
Hi there, I'm Maureen Crawford, and I have done all sorts of open and connected things for the last 20 years because I was involved with home education. I am currently working for Edmonton Public School Board as the consultant in leadership development and really trying to make it open, inclusive, sort of flatten the hierarchy. And I just came running in the door from a session with Banff Centre and their leadership development. So far for what I've managed to eat all day, a popsicle made with my own fruit smoothie, so at least it's healthy. That's it for me. I may be eating while we do this.
Super. Thanks for joining us, Maureen. We're just going to jump right into questions, and I'm going to probably kind of call on you in the order that I can see you on my screen, and I know sometimes in Hangouts people see each other in different orders, so I'll probably kind of call on you to answer, but feel free to jump in if you have something to add to what people are saying. We'll also keep an eye, we've got some people keeping an eye on the Twitter chat and in the Google Hangout page where I think some participants from OCLMooc are watching. So feel free to add questions or comments both in the Twitter feed using the OCLMooc hashtag or in the cMooc Stories event page, which I know a couple people have shared. I know many of you have already answered this question because most of us met in cMooc, but what experience have you had with cMoocs, with cMooc and other types of MOOCs, and what was your first cMooc, which I think for many of us with cMooc was cMooc, but also what kind of experience have you had? Because I know myself, I've participated in some MOOCs, but I also have lurked in many more MOOCs than I have participated in. I'm going to call on you first, Aaron.
Okay. My first official cMooc I guess I ever joined was PostEtmooc, and I actually joined just after the start date because Susan was like, I want to do this thing and I'm too scared to go by myself. Will you join me? So we did that, and we had so much fun creating our video for the mashup that they did. We'll try to put a link online to this mashup we did with the song, and it was really fun. So I got into that. Then after PostEtmooc, I think I did some vlogging, joined a vlogging community and stuff, and then last spring I participated in cMooc, which was a MOOC for Saskatchewan educators about digital citizenship. So the two major cMoocs I participated in were PostEtmooc and cMooc.
Super, Erin, for people who don't know, can you tell us what vlogging is? I know that Susan does some vlogging as well, but in case people don't know what that is, can you talk a little bit about Open Spokes and what you did with your vlogging there?
Sure. So when we were in PostEtmooc, we connected with a bunch of different educators, and then my friend Ben said, hey, why don't you guys create mini videos about topics in education? So Sherry and Susan and myself and a number of other people formed a network that we call ourselves the Fellowship of the Open Spokes. And we sort of have a question of the week or 2 weeks, and we sort of do a little mini video of ourselves reflecting on whatever our topic is. And we've had some really amazing discussions over topics such as, you know, what it means to fail at something, or what it means to be an open educator. So we come up with ideas or topics, and then we all just sort of make our own personal video reflections on them. And so that's what a vlog is, a video blog.
Super, thanks, Erin. I see Maureen next, but I'm going to give you a heads up there, Maureen, because I know you're catching up on dinner. Can you tell us a little bit about your cMooc experiences?
Am I on?
You're on.
Okay, I'm on. Explore PLN, which was set up by Jeff Merrill and Kimberly Scott out of Northwestern University in Chicago, and that was last year. Paul was in there with me. And it was a wonderful exploration with people from all over the world on what a personal learning network is, and all sorts of different components about that, and whether or not an organization has any right to participate in your personal learning network at all. So that was a really seminal one for me, and in fact I'm going to be sharing on this community a sort of self-reflection assessment template that I used for myself with that. One of the things that to me is really great about cMoocs is that it's sort of give what you can and take what you need. So you do not have this great obligation or responsibility for doing any more than works really well for you. Then I was involved in Rhizo 14, and that was based on Dave Cormack's Rhizomatic learning, and went off in all sorts of directions, and was really involved with sort of a poetry heist, where a group of us took a poem and then morphed it and then made audio recordings and put sort of multimedia together for it. I also been really involved with Howard Rheingold and done several different things, and that's not a cMooc because it's not open to the entire universe, but very many of the ways in which we operated and connected and related to one another paralleled what you'd find in a cMooc, and I learned an enormous amount from that, and I'm still part of Howard's sort of alumni grouping and get a lot of just ideas from that and enjoy that sort of connection at that level. So I would say those are my experiences primarily with cMooc.
Thanks, Maureen. And I'll point out that Dave Cormier is actually our special guest tomorrow night in our first synchronous session. So this one, those of you that are in OCLMooc get to watch us chatting and connecting. And this is actually a group, I didn't mention that, we all met in PostEtmooc. It's a group called PostEtmooc that we started because we were worried we would miss each other when PostEtmooc ended. And we've continued to meet at least once a week since cMooc ended. We had a birthday party for cMooc last January. So this is kind of you're watching this while we have our regular monthly chat. But tomorrow night we're having a Blackboard session, and Dave Cornier will be talking about connected learning and his rhizomatic learning, and the details are in the course calendar. Paul, I'm going to connect with you next and ask you about your MOOC experiences. I know that I'm often on Twitter and you're using the same hashtag that I'm following because I'm either lurking or participating in a MOOC.
Yes, to be frank, I will never forget the first night I stumbled into a live MOOC and became engaged in it. I had just come off a course I was teaching asynchronously. It was a 4-week course. It was a Friday night, finished up things, and I decided I was going to look into this thing called cMooc, the Educational Technology and Media MOOC that I kept seeing on Twitter and hearing about. So it was about 7:30 in the evening, went to look at the site, and at about 10:30 in the evening, I finally got out of it thinking, that is magnificent. I was totally drawn into the whole connectivist learning aspect of it, and it took me from looking at these things kind of as a lurker, but more as somebody who had been reading about them, transformed me immediately into somebody that saw the benefits of learning. And like Maureen, I followed up on other connectivist MOOCs last year, including the Exploring Personal Learning Network MOOC. When I saw that you were organizing this one, it was something I had been hoping to get into this year to make that transition from simply learning through them with people to also designing and facilitating. So this, for me, is part of my ongoing education. I love the fact that we sort of have a MOOC cohort that's traveling from MOOC to MOOC. We don't really plan it, but we find ourselves there, and it's a great, great way to learn.
Great, thanks, Paul.
You're welcome.
Sherry, I see you next in my row, so I'm going to call on you next, please, if you could give us your thoughts. But you're muted, Sherry.
Well, first of all, Rhonda, you're doing a wonderful job here explaining about Hangouts while we go. So I think that's really helpful to everybody. I am just so delighted that during that cMooc experience that Ben Wilkoff started the Open Spokes. And so Susan and Aaron and I were doing that vlogging, but that came about from a long discussion in our cMooc about what does connected learning look like and what is it, and we talked about a network as being different nodes in the network. You meet one person and another and build a community, and then there's another community, and then we decided that those were neighborhoods. And so we decided to create our own neighborhood with the Fellowship of the Open Spokes, and then we were each a spoke in that neighborhood. So it's pretty exciting that people that I've never met in person, I consider my friends. So you build this network of a personal and professional experience, and there are people that you can call on and get feedback from, and it's a wonderful experience just beyond whatever the course is.
Thanks, Sherry. And Susan, I know you have very similar experiences.
Yeah, I just want to start by giving a shout out. I can see that Douglas Sutherland is watching us from Australia, which is one of the great things about MOOCs is that you connect with people from across the world. And I know for me, when I first joined, I jumped in on the very last day because I was nervous, I was scared. And I was afraid I was not an ed tech person, I was a high school counselor. And so I thought, I don't know if I can do this. And so jumping in on the last day was really scary and exciting. So I think there are probably some new people in this MOOC who don't even know how to watch an online YouTube event. And so they might watch this later because they couldn't figure it out tonight. And I think that's really important, is that they're going to make lots of mistakes just like we have tonight. And throughout this MOOC, we are going to make lots and lots and lots of mistakes. And what we say is that's okay. That's how we learn. And that's how we get connected. And that's how we do things that will teach us and help us to teach other people. So I know there are lots of, not lots, but I do know I can see at least 4 school counselors that are joining this MOOC from the US and Canada. And so I'd certainly like to give a big shout out to them for joining a MOOC for the very first time. And I know there are non-educators out there, and I think that's really important. If they go onto our website, I want them to know that sometimes that can even be confusing. So to go to the right-hand side and click on every button, you know, they might not see what they want, but if they click on every single button, they'll probably find the calendar, they'll find week 1 and what we're doing. Somewhere in there, they'll find out what we're doing, and they may not know that. I know when I got involved in a MOOC, I didn't even know which button to press. So pressing all buttons is good.
Thanks, Susan. Many of those cMoocs I have participated in or lurked in. And we've talked about lurking a little bit. Sometimes there's something that's going on that sounds really, really fascinating that I'd like to participate in, but I don't necessarily have the time. So there have been quite a few MOOCs that have been mentioned tonight. I started Explore PLN, and then I got too busy, so I was kind of watching what was going on and participating a little bit less. Right now, there's a MOOC going on called Connected Courses that many of the people in this room are participating in that I'm mostly lurking in because I've been fairly busy with OCLMooc, and that's okay as well. In a MOOC, you can participate at different levels. For me, cMooc was my first MOOC. I did not join right at the beginning. That's another thing about MOOCs, especially open MOOCs. You can join at any time. So I thought about it for quite a while. And I had been a connected educator for a little while, but I had always done stuff with my coworkers at the school that I was at. Shout out to my friend Dave Dale, who's joined OCLMooc, who I don't work with anymore. And I had just moved to Edmonton. I had been seconded to Alberta Education. I was doing a new job. I was in a new city, and I couldn't convince anybody to join cMooc with me. So about a week in, I joined. And it was a little bit like falling down a rabbit hole, like Susan said. I really didn't. It took me a while to kind of get oriented, but it was a really exciting experience. There were so many different opportunities and so many things going on. So for those of you that are watching this that haven't done a cMooc before or anything like this, there's all kinds of different ways to get connected, and you may not participate in things right away, or you might participate right away. What often happens for me, I get quite excited, I participate right away, and then my participation drops off. Or it might drop off for a little bit, and then I might come back. So there's all kinds of different ways to participate in a MOOC.
One of the things that I like about participating in a cMooc, I have little kids at home, and so bedtime schedules sometimes fall, or kid events fall at the exact same time other things are scheduled. And so I like going back to the archives of sessions and watching them later, like when the kids are already in bed, or on a Saturday morning when someone's doing something else. So I like the flexibility of being able to watch whenever and then jump back in.
Yeah, great point, Erin. And we call this, you know, the idea initially was to connect Alberta educators, and we knew there would be people from other places who've joined us, and we have people that have joined us from around the world. We apologize in advance. We did schedule for Alberta in this one. Some of the things that we were involved in, we schedule PostEtmooc. We kind of move around the schedule so that our friends in Africa can join us and our friends in Australia can join us. The timing on this one is sort of Alberta-centric, and we apologize in advance if that doesn't work for you. But we will be archiving all of these sessions, all of these synchronous sessions, and there is nothing wrong with listening to it afterwards and then posting your feedback. That's one of the things that we're really stressing in OCLMooc, that they often stress in these cMoocs, these connectivist MOOCs, is your personal reflection. I've talked to a couple people who are interested in joining, and they haven't done so yet because one of the things we're encouraging you to do is blog. So they're busy setting up their blog in the background, which is totally fine, and you can join before you have a blog, and maybe you'll get to the point where you have a blog. But we're really interested in you sharing your learning and your experiences. And not just that, but we're interested in creating conversations. So we hope that you read blogs from other people and that you comment on those blogs, because that's how some of these friendships that you're looking at in this window started, by us commenting on each other's blogs. If you haven't already seen the links for week 1, there's a video in there by Dave Cormier about kind of how to get settled in a connectedness MOOC, and he talks about that. He talks about kind of declaring yourself in your MOOC, in your blog, and then also sort of realizing, sort of clustering, realizing who it is that you have things in common with that you want to connect with. So I did want to mention that you can participate at any level, and it's okay if you don't have a blog yet. You're welcome to sign up even without a blog, and if you create a blog in the future and you want to be included in the blog hub, there's a sign-up form that you can do that. I'm going to ask another question. Oh, no, I'm going to pause because Maureen's got something to say.
Well, there are a couple of things. One, the term lurk to me has some pejorative connotations, and so I really like using sample, because to me that's what happens. You come in, and at different times with different things you've got different expertise. So to come in and sample and just look and not have to overcommit works really, really well. The other thing that I have learned through the Connectedness MOOCs is the importance of dialogue and commenting on other people's things. So if you think, oh, I'm not sure what I want to blog about, or I'm not sure I have anything to say yet, if you can simply start responding to other people, that is absolutely fabulous, and it's a really good way of getting started comfortably. You just pick anything that you feel speaks to you and respond to that, and as far as I'm concerned, sampling is wonderful.
Yeah, great point.
No, I think it was Rhonda a minute ago who said something about how when she first went to one of the MOOCs, she didn't know anybody in there. And I think that's at the heart of what we're all experiencing here in MOOCs as a learning experience, that we go in sort of as strangers a little bit.
Yes.
We're going to make friends there. We're going to learn that we don't have to try to read every post that's done, and that in fact the more we interact with people, the more rich a learning experience we have, and it turns back to the sort of learning experiences we facilitate in our day-to-day work. It's really a fabulous way to go.
And we're kind of getting on to the next question that I was going to ask, so I'll throw this out here. You're already talking about this, but what have you learned or experienced as a result in your participation in cMoocs? And what kind of learnings can you've already shared some great advice for people who are just brand new to this, that might be watching now or that might be watching the archive in the future, about kind of making some sense of this crazy experience of participating in a cMooc. I'm going to start with you again, Erin.
Okay. So one of the words that I've learned over the last couple years that I've really taken to heart is the word tinker. And so maybe before I joined PostEtmooc, I thought that I couldn't go into ed tech stuff because I wasn't an expert in everything. And so I learned how to play and tinker and just try things out and have fun. And so, for example, during week 2, there's going to be a project with Animoto. And when I was working with the person who's created the project, she's like, oh, come on, Erin, just do this Animoto video. And I was like, I've never used Animoto. And then I just went in and played around for like, half an hour or whatever. And I was amazed by how user-friendly so many things are, and how sometimes taking out that word can't from my vocabulary can just make such a big difference. So just playing and tinkering is really, it sounds funny, but that's one of the things I've learned over the last 2 years. Don't say can't, just say I'm going to play.
And a lot of us are educators, not all of us are teachers in a K-12 classroom, but I think one of the dangers that we can get trapped in is thinking that we have to be the expert before we try something. And I always try and use the word play, because so many of you I've played in spaces and done fun things with that I never thought I'd be doing, or never really thought I'd ever try, and it works out really, really fun. So yeah, I would encourage you to think that don't necessarily have to be an expert to try something. And I love how Susan mentioned this. If you're new to blogging, just go ahead and try it and post it, because you can always go back and edit it. And I didn't realize that at first when I first started blogging. And it seemed, pushing that publish button seemed much more serious than it does now, because I always seem to find typos and change things, but it's not there forever. Maureen, what about you? What have you got to say?
Well, it's almost the diametric opposite. I agree 100% with Erin, but one of the things I discovered is that I could be academic, that I didn't have to be afraid of sort of being my full self. And right now I'm in the midst of doing, quite a bit of academic work, and I could try things out with others, and I didn't have to dumb it down. So the whole range could be there, and sometimes I admit some of my blogs are sort of dumbed down because that's the mood I might happen to be in at that time. But I could also go full out. I could put in academic references. I could use specific vocabulary to what it was I was talking about that might be specialized, and I didn't have to think, oh, this has to be generically available to everybody. And then the people who responded were the people who really pushed my thinking in different ways, and that was really intellectually exciting for me. So it was playing, I guess, at a different level, but so there are areas where we all have expertise, and not to feel shy about that expertise, just as we don't feel shy about, well, I'm a newbie in this area of town.
Thanks, Maureen. And what about you, Paul?
Yes, picking up right where Maureen left off, ditto. I totally agree on how being involved in these connectivist MOOCs takes us into a direction that makes us explore things, pushes us sometimes over the edge, which is a very nice thing because we know we're going to bounce back with the security of the teams that we work with. I know I've been blogging a long time. I've been involved in collaborative endeavors in many, many different venues, online and face-to-face. And when I got into cMooc, I was finding it was a very nice experience to read other people's blogs, comment a little bit, then build off those themes, make sure they knew I had done that. So oftentimes what would happen is the connectivism went much further than I expected. We'd start with a Blackboard session. The facilitators would do that. We'd blog about it back and forth. We would carry those conversations into settings like a Google Plus community. On the one hand, it's extremely messy because you never know where things are going to pop up next. But on the other hand, it's wonderfully invigorating, and it reminds you that it's kind of like whack-a-mole learning. Every time you whack one thing down, another one pops up, and you learn from that. It's fabulous.
Oh, great. I see that you joined us. I'm going to give you a minute to get oriented. I'm going to call on Sherry and then Susan, and then I'll have you introduce yourself and add your sense. Go ahead, Sherry.
Okay. All right. So several of you have mentioned some important things that I've learned because as a classroom teacher in the middle school, I know that real learning is not sitting at a desk and absorbing what is put in front of you. I think that this technology and this ability to sample, I like that word rather than lurk, is really how we learn. And if you've been a teacher in a classroom, you know that you may have taught a whole lesson on something, and at the end of it, a student will raise their hand and say, is that how we're supposed to use apostrophes? And you were talking about setting. Because we learn what it is that we need to learn. And I think we have forgotten that in our education system, is that learning is fluid, and we do go in and out, and we learn what we're looking for. So when you're in a MOOC, you're going to sample what the parts that you need. And I could say that, and what I say to my kids is we have two hands. One is so that we can help others, and the other is that we can ask for help. So when you're getting involved in something new like this, find someone who has maybe a common interest as you or a common involvement. They're only there so often. Or some way to connect with someone and keep coming back to connect with them. If somebody asks a question and you think, I know part of that answer, then jump in and give that answer, because that's the part of the participation. And it is messy, and you might fail because, as our friend Denise Krebs said, fail is the first attempt in learning, F-A-I-L. So I brought all of this back to my classroom, and we're a lot messier in my classroom and more project-based, and that comes from reconnecting with what real learning is instead of kind of what education has unfortunately become. And I just read a blog post by Tom Whitby tonight saying that what we need to do in education is educate the educators who are still stuck back in the 19th and 20th centuries. And that's what this is. Once you dip your foot into a MOOC, you become a connected learner, and you are now one of the leaders in education.
Nice. Thank you, Sherry. Go ahead, Susan. Anything to add?
Yeah, well, I certainly agree with Sherry. You can find those commonalities, and we've been able to do that amongst each other. And I think it's important to know for people who are new that really 2 years ago, less than 2 years ago, I didn't vlog, I didn't blog, I didn't tweet, I wasn't a connected learner, I wasn't an open educator, I wasn't able to certainly be a co-conspirator in a MOOC. And 2 years later, we are all, I think, able to do that and still make mistakes, which is okay. But I think it's really important that I not only used it personally in my personal life, which I think it's had an effect both personally and professionally. Professionally, I believe I am as passionate, and I think I got that from Alec Kurose, as about digital citizenship. I've become a digital citizenship advocate and very passionate about everything to do with, and I know you in here have done that as well. That certainly got passed on to me. But personally, interestingly enough, I was saying this to someone just recently, that because of what I learned in the MOOC, the impact for me was I was not a painter 2 years ago, and now I paint in oils and water and acrylics, and it's because of the MOOC's ability to allow you to keep making mistakes that I felt it was okay to paint and okay to escape into that and use that as a balance, because what happens too when you're involved in MOOCs and online is that, like everything when you're learning new, you become totally immersed in it. It's like when you go to university, you're completely immersed, and you spend more time than you probably should on the internet. And for me, I'll speak personally for me. And so you have to find that balance. And how do you find that balance when you have, you have a family, you have your own life, you have your own interest? I consider this my volunteerism when I do this at night to help other educators or school counselors when I lead a school counseling chat every month for school counselors across the world. So I'm totally involved that I was not 2 years ago. And so finding an outlet, and that happened through cMooc, was finding some flow and being able to do things and take risks and do other things that you were maybe afraid to do. If you can get online and do as much as we've done in the past 2 years, then you can do a whole lot of other things, which I think is amazing.
Thanks, Susan. I'm going to call on Vanessa next, and Vanessa's muted, and I'm going to point out for those of you that are new to Hangout, sometimes what happens when you join a Hangout, if there's a certain number of people in there, you're muted by default. So Vanessa's going to have to click on her little unmute button near the top of the screen to unmute herself before she joins us. But I'd love for you to, we've all introduced ourselves, and I'm fairly certain we met in cMooc, Vanessa, but I'm not entirely sure. Can you give us just a little background about who you are and your experience with MOOCs? And do you have anything to add about what you've gotten out of your experiences in MOOCs, please?
All right, let's see where to. I was going to write myself out a little list on things because I did my first MOOC in 210 with Plank, which was the PLN one, one of the big cMoocs that Dave and Stephen and George did, and I started 2 weeks late. I had never been in a MOOC before, and it was like, ah! Well, Vance Stevens, I blame it all on Vance Stevens. I'd been doing a good start for people taking MOOCs if they're not sure about they feel overwhelmed. And even if you don't teach ESL, his Evo workshops, Electronic Village Online that he does before the TESOL conference, and they've got multiliteracies and web heads and all sorts of different special topics. It's rather than it's sort of like really the whole webhead community is like a big community of practice that he's been working with for years. It's ESL oriented, but they're very helpful, and the groups are usually smaller, so they're not quite so overwhelming. But what happened in multiliteracies, and I'd facilitated a workshop in the series the year before, was at the end he says, oh, by the way, there's this interesting course starting up over here at this address. And it's already been running for 2 weeks, but that doesn't matter. Go and try it out. No notion what it was, just a recommendation, so I did. And I think I took the next one kind of on the same principle as of getting thrown off a horse you have to get back on. Because I had a feeling that if I didn't do one and figure it out, I might never give it a fair shake. When I got in, I tried all the usual online stuff about trying to find some people to connect with. But people who didn't know you or knew that you weren't familiar from being in the MOOC environment, and the people who started with CCK 2008 really feel like they're the founders. You may have noticed. I was there in 2008. So I didn't get a whole lot of response, but I found a couple of people, and this is, I think, the way to think. If you can find 1 or 2 people to follow on the blogs are the key. 1 or 2 people, a few people to follow, and then you'll comment, and if they reply, if they don't ignore you, if they reply, I started to sort of, that works better than introducing yourself to total strangers on the course list. I mean, I went through it and said, oh, I'm from New Mexico. Let me see if I can find somebody else from New Mexico. Let me find if I can see somebody else that's coming in from an ESL background or went to school in California. And that didn't work very well. But finding a few blogs to follow seems to be a very good way to do it. At some point, after that, when I started with the next one was CCK, which is what, connected and something or other. Not something knowledge. I keep forgetting what one of the C's is for. I even took the one about analytics. Actually, I took the one about analytics. I started that first because I didn't know any. I knew that it really wasn't my area, but it was the first. It was the next one coming. It was the next bus stopping in front of me, and I thought, no, I've got to get back on. And that one actually worked out pretty well because there were more people. I found more people that would answer me if I commented on their blogs. And actually, when there's a lot of people in the course, you comment on a blog, they're very likely to answer you because there's just not enough commenting to go around. They're really happy to see you. And one thing I'd say is if you find a blog on a MOOC and you're following, make sure and you really like it, make sure and bookmark it, because don't tell yourself, I'll remember that blog and come back to it later. You won't. You'll forget, and then you'll have to go searching for it, and maybe you'll find it. But I still got some connections I made from that first one. As a matter of fact, Gordon Lockhart, who did the comment scrapers, he was in one of them, and he was very discouraged for the sort of lack of community because it was just so big. And he says, when you commented on my blog, it made me feel so good, and we've stayed in touch since. And so I've kind of moved on up. The ones now like, and I think in a way, cMooc was like that. It was a connectivist MOOC, but it had a different feel to it than the Change 11 and the CK11. It was more CCK, whatever, more communitarian somehow. It had a more community feel to it. And then it seemed to spawn another generation of I think of almost like a second wave when you had the CLMooc and the DLMooc and the LCL, and I've got them all tagged and in my reader somewhere, but I can't remember all the different things. But they brought a little bit smaller and a little more specialized, which I think your OCLMooc is going to be too. A little bit more targeted. But they've got, and I can't quite put my finger on it, but they've got a different feel to them than that first wave of connectivist MOOCs. I don't know if anybody else has noticed that, or would be able to say something about why they think it's that way. I think it has something to do with size. I think that under 1,000 is really the way to go. Under 500. The really massive ones are just, it does not, even no matter what they say, it does not scale indefinitely up. And I've taken a few cMoocs, and there's no sense of communication in there. I don't know if anybody here was in the old type chat rooms before you had the social media. You had the open chat rooms. They'd be like zoos, and or the alt lists, bulletin boards. That it was just like a madhouse because there were just too many people repeating themselves, and you couldn't keep track of what was going on. And then again, with the cMooc design, does not lend itself to community either.
No, you're right, Vanessa.
Thanks, Vanessa. Yeah. I'm gonna throw one thing out here, because we were talking about play earlier, and in addition to, I agree with all of you, of course, and I've had experiences like that. But one thing that I have gotten out of MOOCs as well is some fabulous play. Things like playing in an enormous game of Twitter versus Zombies, or participating in the daily creates from DS106, and I'll share those links for that in Twitter, is something I never would have been open to before I met people like you in MOOCs. And I know, Paul, you had something you wanted to add, so I'm going to yield the floor to you now.
Thanks. Vanessa, I think you were right on target when you were talking about the thrill that we experience when we engage in these connectivist MOOCs. We post something on a blog, and we see the people that are actually facilitating them respond to us. I felt that viscerally when I was in cMooc, and Alec Koros, who, of course, was the person right behind that, would take time to tweet responses or actually occasionally post responses to blog pieces I wrote. And I thought, we get worried sometimes that the massive open online courses means impersonal. And yet there was Alec, who seemed to be on Twitter and in that class around the clock. There he was, taking the time to give personal responses. It's fabulous, and I hope we model that in everything we do here.
There's another thing that Alec does that he pioneered really in the MOOCs, and Lisa Lane does in hers, and that's using people who have been in the course before as mentors.
Yes.
And that means that there's more bodies to go around.
That's what I was going to add here, because we talked about Dave Cormier is going to be our first synchronous event tomorrow night, and we're really fortunate. Alex Kouros is going to join us for our last event of OCLMooc, which is on October 31st. And probably all of us would say that Alec is one of our mentors or heroes in open online learning, and he's going to talk about kind of next steps and ways that you can continue to be connected after an experience like a MOOC. I know that John's been participating via Twitter. He's been watching this, and he's got a question that I'm going to throw out there. Do we have any feedback from students about the things that we introduce in class? And I actually have been out of the classroom since I've been participating in MOOCs. So I'm not going to answer that, but I know Erin and Sherry, I think, had something to say about that. Go ahead, Erin.
It was actually me that was going to say something about that. So, and Aaron can chime in as well, because I think both of us utilize it on a constant basis. So everything that we learned in cMooc, and from Aaron has done a number of MOOCs, as well as I've done cMooc, and we've done cMoocs as well. So through all of that, experiential learning and learning online, we have integrated many things into our school. So we use social media to communicate with our students in many facets. So we might use haiku decks to share with them, and use them in our counseling, actually, that we learned how to use tools while we were in the MOOC. And we are using, it's interesting, I think I noticed this week that one of the tools we're using and that we learned to use in the MOOC was Remind, and it used to be called Remind 101. And as a result of modeling that, our students, they have a number of groups that they are running in the school. They do their volunteer group and so on. And I noticed at their tables they had kids signing up for Remind so they could connect with them about when their sports or events or anything was. And so, and the whole blogging, by, again, modeling that, Aaron and I will often ask kids to share their blogs, and if they make a vlog. And our kids, we've learned how to make videos, and so we share, as part of our student services team, we made videos for grade 10, 11, and 12, and I know Aaron this week is doing an anxiety seminar using cMooc. Aaron, you might want to add to that some of the other things the kids have learned as a result of us being in a MOOC.
Well, I think kids at Bishop Carroll are actually really excited that Susan and I stumbled into cMooc. So, for example, one of the tools that we learned from Alex Kuros is to use something called Poll Everywhere. And it's like an online polling thing where you put a question up and the kids use their cell phones to text in their answers. So I'm doing an anxiety workshop today, and it can be kind of a boring topic, but I put up the question on the board, how do you prepare for tests? Well, suddenly I have 30 super engaged kids all wanting their text to go up on the screen instantly to show everyone how they're engaged with studying for the test. So I think just learning from other people and other people sharing their success stories, we get tips and tricks for little things to do in the classroom to try out with our kids. One of the cool things that I did a couple of years ago, as a counselor, sometimes my kids feel like they don't have a story to share. So I co-wrote a haiku deck story with one of my students. I asked her what advice she'd learned over the last 3 years from her and I sort of talking together. We put it out there. It's had over 12,000 views. So she feels like she can share this story with all these people and help all these teenagers around the world based on something we did in my office together 2 years ago. So it's pretty amazing.
Awesome. I'm aware of the time. These kind of chats, they always seem like they last about 5 minutes, and then I look up at the clock and, oh, we've been talking for an hour. So I'm just going to mention that if you are watching this in Twitter, or you're watching it live in the live on air through the Hangout, and you have any questions, please ask them. But what I'm going to do while we're waiting to see if there are any questions is I'm going to go through the line again and ask people if they have any final comments about, especially about participating in a cMooc for newbies, for somebody who this kind of experience is a new experience. Any advice we might not have mentioned other than don't be scared, and whatever you do is right, that you might want to share. So I'm going to start with you again, Aaron. Words?
If you don't know how to do something, just ask. So in a Twitter chat, if you don't know what question was asked, just say, hey, what question am I doing? And someone will jump up and help you. Or in Google+, if you don't know where to find something, just post a question. Someone will jump out and help you. And then you'll make someone else feel good that they could give you that answer.
Right on. Thanks. What about you, Maureen? Any advice?
Comment, 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 and have fun.
That's great. Paul?
Yeah, the tips that I picked up were from Alec and others in the Educational Technology and Media MOOC, which is they included the idea that you cannot fall behind. You set your own learning goals. You work at your own speed. Don't allow yourself to be overwhelmed because you're really here to learn what you want to learn. Play with the tools. Don't be afraid of failure. It leads to magnificent experiences and great, great exchanges.
And I would just check that off. I think Paul said that perfectly. And the comment. And if you see a question you can answer, jump in and be that answer, because everybody's at a different level, and just jumping in to help someone is really important.
There she is. You froze for a second there, Sherry,
Okay.
so I want you to repeat what you just said. I'm sorry.
Okay, I just agreed with Paul and Maureen. And comment, because, and if somebody asks a question, even if you only know part of the answer, go ahead and jump in and help. And pretty soon you'll find yourself being part of the support team, because that is what makes it, the MOOCs, personal. And so just don't be afraid to say anything. Even if you only have part of the answer, put that part and somebody else will add it. And it just starts to build that community.
Awesome. Thanks, Sherry. Before I call on you, Maureen, I'm going to mention, I know John's watching us in Twitter, and Doug's been participating in the Google Hangout. If either of you have any words of wisdom for participants who might be watching this, please share them with us in Twitter or in the Hangout, and we'll share them. Go ahead, Susan. What do you have to add?
Well, I want to encourage people. There's my friend Gail, as you can see.
Hi, everybody.
and this is her first engagement in this kind of MOOC, and I want you all to feel like you can. So maybe you can, you might not, if you're online and you know someone who knows a little something, you can engage them by asking them. So maybe you learned it online, but you can then go in your own community and say, oh, do you know how to do this? So can you show me? Or I just started this, which is really exciting. And I think, like everybody has said, just jump in, comment, don't be afraid, it's okay, engage, just keep on, take as much. I always like the saying, take what you like and leave the rest. So if you like it, use it, and if you don't, it's okay. You don't have to do that. So I really encourage the new people to come along, get what you want. What I think is really important is that whatever you need to get out of this MOOC, get out of it. You need to ask for it. You need to say, this is what I need. I want to be a more blended learner, so I'd like to connect with learners that are using that. Or I am a community member, and all I want to know is really how to use Twitter. It just confuses me. Ask. It's okay.
Super. Thanks, Susan. What about you, Vanessa? Anything to add?
One thing, Elsie, if depending upon the confusion level of the course, in the course when it starts, one thing that Dave Cormier did in Planck that was a total lifesaver for me was every week, at the end of the week, he wrote a blog post. It was a recap of the week. So when I was going like, what did I miss? What was going on? And that was a huge help. It was a lifesaver. I think I might have gotten totally discouraged if something like that hadn't been there, at least, or that. And one other thing I'd like to add too is I noticed that with cMooc, it seems like a whole wave of K-12 educators that hadn't been participating that much in the earlier MOOCs showed up. And this is what y'all are mostly, I gather. I'm retired higher ed, but I've done adult literacy and GED and ESL and a little bit of everything. But you have brought, I think, a breath of fresh air into the building. I think maybe it's time. Maybe it's spending time with younger with children. You still have the play is contagious.
Oh, thanks, Vanessa. I'm going to mention one thing that it sounds kind of silly, but it was so important for me to hear this. Discovering cMooc really was a bit like falling down the rabbit hole for me, and it was a fantastic experience. But I was up at all hours, participating in events, reading tweets and doing stuff, and then somebody said, it was probably Alec, you don't have to read every tweet. And it's really true, you know, most things, even the best post, the best blog post, or the best piece of advice, they really do come around more than once. So if you need to take a day off, or you know you can't participate for a little while, it's totally okay. I'm echoing what other people have said. You can participate at any level that works for you, and the amount of participation that you want to do, it could change.
And
I'm going to turn it over to Erin.
We understand that everybody has a life and a family outside of OCLMooc. My daughter would like you guys to all see this shining sun she has created for us on OCLMooc. It's her arts and craft that she did for her quiet time while Mom was online. And so I'm sharing this with everyone because we understand everybody has a family and other things going on too. And this is my daughter's gift to all of you, this happy sunshine.
Thanks, Erin and Erin's daughter.
Thank you.
I know Maureen's got one other thing she wants to add. Go ahead, Maureen.
I just want to add that the Massive Open Online course, the Massive, it was really instrumental for me to find out that when it was originated with sort of Stephen Downes and Dave Cormier, the Massive actually stood for massive potential. Not how many people are being overwhelmed, but for the massive potential. And that kind of encapsulates it for me.
Super. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm just going to sort of summarize what the rest of this week could look like for you if you're participating in OCLMooc. It certainly doesn't have to. Like we say, you don't have to participate in everything. We're inviting you to create an introductory blog post and share it with us. We're inviting you to join the G+ community and to start looking at the OCLMooc Twitter hashtag. Our next synchronous event is tomorrow night at 7 o'clock Mountain Time. As we've mentioned, we're really excited that Dave Cormier is going to be our special guest, and he's going to be talking about MOOCs and their potential, and I'm certain he's going to be talking about rhizomatic learning and kind of how to navigate your way through. We do have a Hangout scheduled only if you're interested. We just set it up for 2 o'clock on Sunday, again, Mountain Time. And it's just the idea that you could pop in there. I'll be waiting in case people have questions. It's not a Hangout that's going to be broadcast on air. I'll probably be sitting there with my cup of tea blogging unless anybody pops in. And the idea is just if you have any questions or comments that you want to ask face-to-face, you can do it then. But of course, as we've mentioned, you can do it via Twitter. You can send it to any of the co-conspirators, or you can just ask them in the Google Plus community. And then the final event for this open week is on Tuesday night. We're going to be doing a Twitter chat at 7 o'clock, and we're going to be using this OCLMooc hashtag. So that's what's going on for the rest of this week. I'm going to pause for one moment just in case my friends here have anything else that they want to add. And if not, I'm just going to say goodnight and push the stop broadcast button.
Do you remember the saying about men are like streetcars? Anybody old enough to remember that? Yeah, if you miss one, there'll be another one along in 15 minutes.
Awesome, Vanessa. Well, thank you, my friends, for joining us tonight. My PostEtmooc community, you know how much you mean to me, and I so appreciate you joining us and joining our new friends in OCLMooc to share this broadcast with us tonight. It's going to be archived at the OCLMooc site, and I'm going to push the stop button right now. Thanks very much.
Thank you.